What does this feel like? This was silence. Within just a few seconds of silence, our attention sharpens. At least in cultures where silence in a conversation isn't the norm. Longer pauses in a conversation make us feel awkward. It is when we think, is there something wrong? And maybe you thought, did he forget his script? It's interesting. Silence can unsettle us, largely because it has become very rare in this constantly buzzing world. I mean, how often do you hear nothing? Nothing at all. Noise is the constant companion. Silence is like the rare friend. But there's also a deeper reason why silence may irritate us. Longer moments of silence may remind us of some unsolved problems in our lives. And it could be something very trivial like, oh, I forgot to buy some groceries in the store, my fridge is empty. Or something more worrisome, I need to get this medical checkup done. There seems to be something in our brains that gets activated when we are in silence, and then we have an insight. But what is that? The reason I became a neurologist was I was so fascinated about how our brain works. And I've learned that our brain constantly wants to protect us from harm. And it therefore creates emotions like fear and anxiety so that we are motivated to solve our problems. And once they are solved, fear and anxiety go away. But when there's a lot of noise, we might overhear those silent messages our brain is sending to us. And this has different consequences. I mean, if you forget your groceries, you can buy them any other time. You will not starve immediately. But when it comes to your health, ignoring those persistent silent messages for too long might turn into real problems. In the 1990s, I was working as a stroke neurologist in a German hospital. And I remember one patient in great detail, although I've seen more than 1,000 stroke patients. But this one was special. So the paramedics bring that patient into the emergency unit, a young man in his 40s, and I immediately see he cannot move his left arm or leg. So I take him quickly to the brain scanner, and I see that his brain artery is blocked. So I run to get an infusion connected to his vein and hope that this infusion will open his blocked brain artery. But nothing happens. And all I can do is sit there and wait. It takes a nerve-wracking 45 minutes until I start to see some small movements of his fingers again. And slowly after that, he can lift his arm. So I take him quickly to the stroke unit overnight. And at the next morning, with some help, he's able to walk again. And after a week, we can discharge him without any symptoms. So this young man was incredibly lucky because most patients are not. In fact, most patients leave the hospital after a brain infarct with some disability, some even to the extent that they can no longer live an independent life. What frustrated me was I was chasing a clock and almost always came too late. You know, watching patients' life and well-being hinge on those moments left an ache in my heart that stayed with me every single time. Because the truth is, a stroke takes years, if not decades, to develop. When you spend most of your life sitting, smoking, having an unhealthy diet habit, your blood vessels will narrow down, your blood gets thicker, and blood clots may form easier. And then your blood vessels may turn into ticking bombs, and no doctor in the world can turn back time. I've had countless conversations with patients after a stroke, and many of them followed a very painful pattern. They would regretfully say, "Doctor, if I only had taken more care of myself, if I only had listened more to those signals of my body. And I would tell them, please, don't blame yourself. This is not helpful now. But it's true. Why do we pay so little attention to those silent signals of our body before they get screaming at us? And the most important reasons I've found during my life and career is the absence of silence. It is the noise. Our world has become very loud, and it is easy to overhear those signals our body is sending to us. We live in this era of information, which is great. I mean, nowadays, we can access the whole knowledge of mankind through a small device, always available at our fingertips. Just some years ago, this was a mere dream of ours. And yet, there's a downside to this wealth of information. And as a neurologist, I'm mostly concerned about how this information noise affects our brain. And we do have fantastic brains. I mean, our brains constantly learn and store new information. But they are not like computers. They don't store information like on a hard drive. Instead, each new piece of knowledge fits neatly weaving into what we already know by connecting it to our long-term memory. But here comes the bottleneck. And this is our working memory, where we store information for a short period of time. Our working memory has a very limited capacity. Our working memory is like a small kitchen countertop, right? Where you put all the ingredients for food to prepare a meal. But it can only fit so much. And if it gets cluttered, you will not find anything, not to mention provide and prepare a proper meal. And you will stay hungry. In other words, when your working memory is overwhelmed by too much information, it doesn't only make it harder to remember things, it's always and also more difficult to focus, to learn, and to solve problems. When your working memory is overloaded, your complete cognitive system can stall. But things get even worse. Because it's not only the pure information that stresses our working memory, it is also the emotion that is tied to every information piece. Your email inbox, your social media feed, they are like emotional slot machines. And every post, every email may trigger an emotional spin with potential outcomes like fear, worry, anger, jealousy, frustration, and sometimes joy. But the frequency of emotion and information we face nowadays, they're like an emotional roller coaster ride we have every day. And this disrupts our working memory. This disrupts the transfer of information into our long-term memory, and this disrupts our mental well-being. Our brains are capable of incredible things, and most of us are resilient in our daily lives. But the rise of cases in burnout, depression, anxiety disorder show us that many of us have reached their mental limits. So did I. But I didn't realize it because I would not listen. Although my body was screaming at me, I had so much pain in my knees. I couldn't stand too long. I couldn't sit. I had pain in my back, in my joints. But I wouldn't admit it. It was my brain that was sick. I was so frustrated and so tired at work. And I didn't realize for over a year that I was so close to complete burnout. And when I recovered, I asked myself, now what can I do to protect my mental health? What would I recommend to others? And the answers had to be simple, yet practical, brain-friendly. And, these kind of techniques that you could easily implement into your daily lives. So I did a lot of research in mental health, and I came across a groundbreaking discovery in neuroscience. A discovery that explains why silence is so important for our mental well-being. And the best part, this discovery was made by chance and in silence. The neuroscientist Markus Reichler, he did some brain research, and he had his volunteers lie in a scanner, and he gave them some mental tasks to do. But in the pauses, when the volunteers were not doing anything, relaxing, even daydreaming, a particular network in the brain still showed significant activity, even more than when they were doing tasks. So this revolutionary finding was that our brains are constantly working in the background when we pause in silence. This network literally solves our problems when we do nothing. And we know this network now by the name default mode network, or short DMN. But what is the role of this DMN? When you are in silence, you subconsciously think about yourself. You think about others. You reflect. You think about your past. You envision your future. The DMN connects your long-term memory with different parts of the brain and helps you create new ideas and insights. And that's one reason why you sometimes have the best ideas when you're sitting in the bathroom. Great things are always created in silence, right? But silence isn't the answer to everything. We do not want nor need silence all the time. But when the DMN is disturbed for a longer period of time, we now know that it is associated with a lot of different mental disorders like ADHD, autism, schizophrenia, even dementia. And we don't know all the details yet. But while science is progressing, what we can do now is plant little islands of silence into our daily life so that the DMN works properly, gets balanced. So here are my recommendations based off my personal experience. The first one is what I call the Steve Jobs method. Steve Jobs had a magic secret to overcome mental and creative blocks. So he was working on a program and the problem, he didn't solve it it took him more than 10 minutes to solve. He did this one simple thing. He took a walk. He was once walking with his architect in London Hyde Park, and he had this idea, this vision that one day his employees would have a huge space at work where they could stroll around, create new ideas while walking in silence. What happens when you walk? You automatically have this mental awareness and this mental tension for creative ideas, provided you leave your mobile phone and the heavy thoughts behind you, right? If you ever visit Apple Park in Cupertino, you will see how his vision became true. My second recommendation is an anti-stress routine I do at work. So if you have a very emotionally stressful and challenging meeting at work and you feel like an angry wolf afterwards, don't just continue working. Allow yourself some minutes of silence. Open the window. Take some deep breaths like, and by this, allow your DMN to reflect on what just happened, also emotionally. And at the end of your day, you will not feel so stressed out. But my favorite is something which I like very much because it gives you a weapon against one of the hardest battles we have at the workspace. The battle against distractions. We lose about 2 hours for distractions on average at work, be it automatic notifications, some messages, some calls, some, thoughts, emotions we get attached to. And it may take up to 25 minutes until we refocus on what we were originally working on. So what I do is imagine having a kind and silent voice in my head. And when I'm about to get distracted, it whispers to me saying like, Aurel, is this distraction really worth you losing 25 minutes of your time? And mostly my answer is no. Silence is a superpower. It is a source of great strength. It shouldn't irritate us. It should energize us. My speech has been now maybe about 15 or 16 minutes. How much silence do you think was in my speech? Probably around 3 to 4 minutes if you cut out all the small pauses and silences, almost 1/4. But let's take this one step further. In this world that never stops, where silence has almost become a forgotten luxury, I'd like to make you a gift. A gift of silence, a lot of silence. I will pause for 15 seconds, just 15 seconds, although it might seem like hours to you probably. But when I say now, I invite you to do nothing. No words, no gestures, just silence. Now. What does this feel like? See how quickly small pockets of silence can calm your mind. And just imagine what more silence could do for you. And remember that feeling, that moment of nothing. And realize, sometimes in the quiet, we hear what matters most.